Good morning and welcome to the second lecture of mine in the series on karma and science. In the previous lecture, we have talked about the basic details of the nervous system, including that of the brain. We learned about the intricacy of this marvelous system and organ and something about its functioning. As we know, all the karmas are initiated, planned in our mind, and the execution is done by the brain. Thus, we can formulate a more significant role of the brain and mind in the genesis of the karma. Today's deliberation, I'll take you along some of the intricacies and the specific considerations which are there in the brain, and also will talk to you in short about the research potential in a simple language. To fulfill the above aim, we shall walk along the following milestones. In the first portion, we will talk about the extent of brain and mind which is there in the animal kingdom. How does the brain and mind functions independently as well as jointly? I will also approach you of some of the qualities of the brain and mind, such as plasticity in the nervous system, Triune theory, default mode networks, and memory. In the previous lecture, we have gone through many important qualities of the brain and the nervous system. Some of them are: brain is the backbone for the functioning of mind and possibly of the soul. Thus, to understand the functioning of mind, it is utmost essential for us to understand the intricacy of the brain and the nervous system. It is the seat of all higher mental functionings, such as intelligence, creativity, emotions, and memories. Brain is metabolically highly active organ. In contrast to 2% of the body weight, which is made up of, it utilizes approximately 20% of the blood and oxygen available in the body. This shows the importance of the brain as a system in the human being. Brain has a large cell population with approximately 1 trillion neurons, and 10 to 50 times of that the glial or supporting cells. All our perceptions, whether conscious or unconscious, are filtered, altered, analyzed, and organized in the brain. Processing of our impulses and signals in the brain occur at a tremendous, fast, and accurate speed through electrochemical mode. The weight of the brain in the human is one of the highest one we will be seeing in this lecture as well. There are 4 lobes: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Prefrontal part of the frontal lobe is the highest developed in the human being. Perhaps humans are recognized or characterized with this particular lobe. There are many deeper structures, though in their structure they are akin to what is available in other animal kingdoms, but they are highly developed in the human beings. Important amongst them are thalamus, hypothalamus, pituitary, and the pineal gland. Another important structure in the brain we talked about was about the limbic system, consisting of limbic cortex, amygdala, and hippocampus. Another important system which is available to the human being is the independent autonomic nervous system, having 2 antagonistic actions, and the separate system, namely the sympathetic, mainly for the fight and flight, and parasympathetic nervous system, which is available to us for the regeneration and the making up of our body, creativity and other things.
We have learned a lot in the last more than 50 years with the accelerating pace of research in neurological and behavioral science. Lot of things have been understood in the brain thanks to the diagnostics like computed tomography known as CT scan, magnetic resonance imaging known as MRI. We have learned a lot about the structural details of the brain and changes which occurs in our life and with the meditation in a greater detail. The functional aspect of the brain were studied through the positron emission tomography known as PET and also through the fMRI, which is a really advanced in the our armamentarium. We have got a big tool. The fMRI, as you see in the diagram here, lot of areas are activated even during a single task. Thus, it breaks the myth that the one area of the brain is responsible for the one action. That's not true. The brain functions in a logical and combined way rather than an isolated way. Another important advances are the genetic and epigenetic studies and cytochemical studies, including the hormonal changes which are there in the brain and in the body with the various lifestyle changes. As shown in the slide, many areas of the brain are involved, thus the many changes in the genes and the hormones are there. This also supports the doctrine that brain functions recruiting multiple areas rather than limiting to one area. Blood flow studies are now shedding more lights on the subject of cortical and brain functions, which we were in dark till recently. The size of each area in the brain directly corresponds to the amount of information being transmitted to or from the brain. For example, the area for the control of thumb is far greater than for the little finger. There is a homunculus for the premotor cortex also, which varies quite a bit from the motor strip homunculus. Blood flow studies and functional MRI studies are now shedding more light on the subject of cortical and brain functions, but we remain in dark ages when it comes to understanding the human brain. Larger brains are associated with the larger bodies and animals with the higher weight, but not with the greater intelligence. They are not directly related. The size of each area in the brain directly corresponds to the amount of information being transferred to them. Whales, elephant, and gorilla have a heavier brain in the tune of 1.7 to 7.8 kgs compared to that of man with 1.3 to 1.4 kg. However, the humans are blessed with a higher intelligence than the other animals. This slide, very important one, depicts average brain weight against the body weight. Humans with the highest intelligence have the heaviest brain relative to the body weight you can see on the left top. While a newborn human has a brain of 350 to 400 grams, it increased to 1300 to 1400 grams as the age advances. And as I have said, the size of each area or the increase in size of each area is not uniform. It directly corresponds to the amount of information being transmitted to and from the brain. Studies indicate small to moderate correlation, averaging around 0.3 to 0.4 between brain volume and IQ. The most consistent associations are observed within the frontal, temporal, and parietal lobes, the hippocampi, and cerebellum. However, they account for relatively small amount of variance in intelligence quotient, which itself has a partial relationship to the general intelligence and real world performance. Thus, the brain size and the brain functioning is not directly related to the intelligent quotient or IQ. This is the pictorial depiction of the brain in different animals, including humans. Dolphin and chimpanzees have got the size nearer to us, whereas that in the sheep or in the cat or rat, they are smaller. Studies have indicated that IQ has a partial relationship to the general intelligence and the real world performance. It is now surmised that IQ is not only related to the number of neurons, which are in the tune of approximately 1 trillion, it is more related to the number of interconnections, which varies between 1000 to 15,000 per neuron. In general, children have a higher or larger number of interconnections compared to that in adults. Thus, the intelligence perhaps is higher in children than in adults. This proves that during the phase of learning, there are larger number of interconnections and larger intelligence. This is an interesting diagram. All these animals, as per the anatomical studies and the structural studies, they do possess brain. But do they have mind? Divergent views of the existence of mind in subhuman animals. Convergent evidence indicate that non-human animals have the neuroanatomical, neurochemical, and neurophysiological substrate of conscious state, along with the capacity to exhibit intentional behavior. In the sense of being awake, most animals are conscious. But do they have consciousness as per the philosophical definition? Most scientists agree that animals have complex mental capacities in which a few species have attributes once thought to be unique to human, such as ability to give object names and use the tools. However, it is different from what we humans do, and the extent of mind in these animals is quite different than that of the humans. As per Jain philosophies, only some of the 5 sense animals are bestowed with minds, Sangini Panchendriya. Science and a few philosophies, however, disagrees with it and are of the opinion that most animals are blessed with the mind. While we continue with the controversy of existence of mind in the subhuman animals, even within the human race, it is a controversy which exists a lot amongst the neuropsychologists and also in the philosophers, that different people have different brain, IQ, and the mind. Though they are different, but their magnitude may be equal. However, logical conclusion is that all humans are born with equally developed brain and the mind. They have got the divergent intelligence, brain capabilities, and the mind. Their expression and output vary greatly depending on the circumstances. Person proficient in one or more areas will perhaps be poor in other faculties. This is true for all individuals. Only the variables which can be there
are the nutrition, social upbringing, and diseases in the childhood. They are perhaps the major variants or the major influencer of the brain and the mind. If you look into this slide, person doing the meditation may claim of the higher intelligence and the higher mind, but that's not true. Even a lady doing the labor work or a farmer may be having the equal mind and the equal intelligence, and his darshan or the perceptions may be even better than the people who are either doing meditation or they are under the tension. The transfer of a message from the axon of one nerve cells to the dendrites of another neuron is known as neurotransmission. It occurs with an unimaginable high speed. Electrical action potential generated within the brain are conducted to the muscles and glands to regulate their activities. They are an important means by which brain enables itself in transferring to and fro information from one part of the body or one part of the brain to another. There are two distinct modes of the transmission of impulses in the nervous system, namely electrical and biochemical. Electric current generated by an impulse occurs in the neuronal cell bodies, possibly in the axons and the dendroid, spread directly into the next neuron through a low resistance pathway. Nerve impulse travels till the end of the axon electrically. Subsequent transmission to the next neuron occurs through the chemical way. The junction between the axon of one neuron and dendrite of another neuron is called synapse. We have talked about the synaptic transmission in detail in previous lecture. Just to summarize, transmission of impulses at synapses occur through the chemical messengers. There it triggers the release of molecules called the neurotransmitters from the axons into the synapse. These neurotransmitters fit into the special receptors on the receiving nerve cells. In human brain, part of the axon is covered with the myelin sheath, which has got high resistance and low capacitance. Myelinated nerves are used by the brain for signaling in pathway where speed is of the importance. This is an important slide to understand the connection between the brain and mind. Both Jain's philosophy and science agrees that brain and mind are closely linked and depend on each other for their existence and the functioning. Likewise, in science, Jain philosophy also regards the brain as a part of the physical body. However, there is a big difference when the mind is taken into consideration. Science considers the mind as an extension of the physical brain, possibly of the Dravya mind mentioned in the philosophical literature. Mind is perhaps an electrochemical tool and cannot be measured with the physical gadgets. Certain human capabilities such as non-verbal communication, mind reading, face reading, and premonition are extension of the physical mind only. However, the existence of a separate bhav mind, as proposed in Jain philosophy, is not being agreed by the scientists. Science as well as neuropsychologists consider bhav mind also as an extension of the physical mind and not as a separate entity. The information gained in the brain about the external environment through external senses, about the body through the internal sensations, and through the mind are conventionally described as a combination of serial as well as the parallel processing as shown in the lower left diagram. However, this is not true.
Brain doesn't work in this simplistic model. It has got a multi-pronged processing where innumerable way it communicates with the neurons within the brain. The current scientific inference about the body, including the brain, mind, and soul, perhaps soul and universe, is summarized in the adjacent diagram on the right side. They are a continuum single process in their nature. They all work on the same law, similar law, and doesn't have a separate entity or a separate existence as has been told in the Jain philosophy. The Turing theory, developed by scientist MacLean, taking into consideration of the evolution of the brain, and postulated that the human brain actually has three brains in one. The three brains of MacLean's Turing theory are reptilian brain, mammalian brain, and the human brain. Or the reptilian brain, shown on the violet diagram on the right side of the top, it consists of the brainstem, cerebellum, hypothalamus. It is basically for the reactive and reflexive functions to safeguard animals against external hazards and enemies. That's why the name reptilian or reptile has been given. The mammalian brain resides in the limbic system. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is an older part that provides experience and express emotions. The behavior of the mammalian brain is said to revolve around feeding, fighting, fleeing, and mating. Though the mammalian brain involves mammals, including the human, have the pleasure when engaged in the activity that enhance their preservation or preservation of their species. Pain is experienced when survival needs are thwarted. From the limbic system of perspective, all experiences are judged in the dualistic fashion of the pain or pleasure. Its primary approach is survival and preservation of the self and the species. Thus, it rewards the approach or the social behavior in the animals. The subsequent evolution of the surrounding cerebral cortex, a large cerebral cortex in the higher mammals, especially human, gave the capacity for advanced functions such as planning, thinking, problem solving, organization, analyzing, and communication. Yet, in order for these functions to occur, one must have passion, emotions, and desire to make it happen. The deep limbic system adds to the motivation, emotional feeling, and the drive in both positive and negative ways to various actions of the human being. What we have seen that perhaps we are fighting more to develop the reptilian and the mammalian brain rather than concentrating our efforts on the human neocortex to be developed. As per current research, average female have a larger deep limbic system than males. This gives them the several advantages and disadvantages. Due to the large deep limbic brain, women are more in touch with their feelings and they are generally better able to express their feelings than men. Another important function of the brain is to maintain homeostasis. It is described as a state of equilibrium in the body with respect to vivid functions and composition of the various fluids and tissues. This is essential that for a survival, homeostasis is necessary. The trillions of the neurons do not function independently but work together to maintain the homeostasis. Hypothalamus in the brain in the deeper structure in the brain is mainly responsible for maintaining homeostasis through the hormones and other things. This is the one of the quality which perhaps exists in the human being, but also in the unicellular organisms, amoeba, and subsequent all multicellular organisms. Another important characteristic of the nervous system is the plasticity. The word has come from the word plastic, which denotes ability to change or being molded or altered as per circumstances like learning, injury, or illnesses. There are changes in the functions and the structures within the neuron. Earlier it was thought that the brain cells, one developed, are never replaced or changed. However, this is not so. These changes occur throughout the life, more so in children. Thus, children are more in adapting to the new circumstances and the new functions. Plasticity involves all neurons, glia, and vascular cells.
The default mode network, popularly known as DMN, is the network of interacting brain regions that are active when a person is not focused on the outside world. Thus, he is quiet. This observation was available to us with the fMRI studies, where we have observed that while person is at rest or not thinking anything, this DMN becomes active. It consists of medial prefrontal cortex, MPFC, posterior cingulate cortex, precuneus, inferior parietal lobe, lateral parietal cortex, and hippocampal formations. It has been observed that DMN contributes to our internal mode of cognition used when remembering and thinking about the future and in mind-wandering state. Studies have demonstrated that meditation has been associated with relatively reduced activity in the default mode network, a brain network implicated in self-related thinking and mind-wandering. Memory, a very popular topic in the public as well as in the academicians, is a complex process that includes three phases: encoding, deciding what information is important or relevant, storing it, and then recalling when needed. Different areas of the brain are involved in memory depending on the types of the memory. It is present across all the animals and plant kingdom, but is highest developed in the humans. There is a sequential as well as parallel processing once information is gathered from the environment through the sense organs, or also from the inner self or through the mind itself. These informations are collected and they are sorted out in the thalamus, sent to the hippocampus or the limbic system for the organization, where these are sequentially and parallelly organized. Here, hippocampus and amygdala, supplemented by the hypothalamus and other subaortical structures, give their own input to refine the memory. During the process of analyzing, it gets a massive input from memory stores in the body. Now it is stored as a short-term memory and working memory, which refers to the capacity for holding a small amount of information in an active, readily available state for a short interval. This is akin to the RAM or random access memory in your personal computer. Now the information from the short-term memory makes way to the long-term memory. The short-term memory or the working memory, when it is repeatedly used or repeatedly rehearsed, it turns into the long-term memory, which is stored throughout the brain. No particular area has been identified so far. This is akin to the hard disk in a computer with an unlimited capacity. The limbic system, including hippocampus and the amygdala, functions to convert short-term memory into the long-term memory. Ultimately, the hippocampus stores the memories which have got emotional and motivational significance. It is activated when one want to memorize something for a long time. The memory process, which I have described in the previous slide, is not a simple or a linear. It's a complicated process. But for the sake of understanding, we are divided into the 5 types. They are semantic, episodic, procedural, automatic, and emotional. Let's describe one by one. Semantic memory is referred to as which is learned from the words and have unlimited capacity. They are mostly located in the hippocampus. The second variety, the episodic, it is the memory of everyday events, which comes as an events such as time, location, geography, associated emotion, and other contextual informations. They are mostly located in the hippocampus. Coming to the procedural or skill memory, this is related to procedures and is stored when process becomes routine. That's become a part of the skill. It stores automatically learned memories like tying a shoes, playing an instrument, or riding a bike. It is commonly stored in the cerebellum, caudate nucleus, putamen, and motor cortex. The next important variety is the automatic. It is referred to as an unconscious memory or automatic memory, which is mainly stored in the cerebellum and can trigger other lanes also. The most important one is the emotional memory. It is a memory of the experiences that evoked an emotional reaction. It is the most powerful of all. Experiments have proved that stress hormones, when they are in excess, blunts its occurrence. Thus, we don't gather emotional memory when we are under stress. While this classification is primarily for understanding, none works in isolation, they all work in unison. All above mentioned memory processes or the type of memories they are can be summarized in this slide. We know that memory refers to the learning. When stored in one or more than one lane, it becomes more powerful. What important is the intricacies of the brain and the mind are mainly responsible for the memory. These memory, they control all our functions, all our actions. All our learning is equivalent to memorizing and doing more so in one lane, making it a stronger one. Equally important is that to avoid clutter and confusions, every day we prune a large number of unused neural connections or the memory lanes. The common quote, use it or lose it, it's quite relevant to keep our memory active. Though we have learned a lot about the brain and nervous system, still we are ignorant about its complete functioning and its relevance to our daily life. Some of the initial research projects undertaken are which will pave for the way for advanced studies are as below. Development of human brain from fetus to adult to address relevance of various functions at each stage. This will tell us that how the human develops the functional capacities and what are the structures involved in it, what are the processes involved in it. Second important research proposal or point will be compare brain size and structure in different species, including humans. Thus, we will be knowing that how the human has evolved and how the functions have been either exaggerated or evolved or they have been pruned or reduced. These brain size and structure need to be correlated with the functional efficiencies. Then role and relevance of the pineal gland. Pineal gland is one of the glands which has been labeled in the philosophical literature as the third eye or as the seat of the soul. But does it really so? Science doesn't support it. fMRI and EEG and hormonal studies can be undertaken while doing meditation, and different areas of the brain which are either hyperactive or they are low active during the meditation can be identified. Another important one will be role and relevance of a spinal cord in Kundalini, a concept which is very much prevalent in the philosophy, but science doesn't subscribe to it. In the last 4 lectures, including the today's, we have deliberated on some of the intricacies of the brain and the mind. These structures, through their efficient functioning, guide all our bodily functions. However, a lot still need to be explored. Characteristics of the human brain lies not only in large number of neurons, approximately 1 trillion, but also in the number of interactions which are in the tune of 10 raised to 15. Thus, to ascend upward in the ladder of spiritual development, we must find ways and means to enhance these interconnections. More scientific studies with fMRI, EEG, hormonal assay, and the genetics and epigenetic studies are needed to document changes which are there in the brain with the Jain lifestyle and while doing meditation. There is a need of amalgamating advancing scientific knowledge with ancient philosophical knowledge. Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing my dialogue on one of the important topics of the brain and nervous system, that is, intricacies of the sensations and the perceptions. We will also elaborated on some of the areas where science and the Jain philosophy intermingles or diverge at the places. Having loaded you with a large amount of information, it's now your turn to dissect the subject with queries and confusions.